Hello everybody, this is Bibby of Bibby's Models, and this video is for the people who have purchased or been given the Pegasus kit that requires some gluing before you actually start assembling it. So this video is going to take you through that process. It's very simple, and the things that you should gather before you even start are shown on this table. Now the glue of choice is somewhat up to you. I'm using Elmer's wood glue. Tight Bond wood glue is a good choice. This is the amber colored yellowish glue. The white wood glue, the regular Elmer's glue we all grew up with as kids, works pretty well as well. So you can use the white glue or the wood glue. The wood glue is a little more aggressive. It's a little stronger, so it's kind of up to you. I apply the glue with a paintbrush. So I have here just an old jar filled with water and a pretty crummy little modeling paintbrush. To apply the glue, I usually put it onto a piece of scrap paper or cardboard. So I have a little piece of scrap cardboard here. I will pour the glue into a little puddle and then apply it using the brush. Alternatively, you can apply using some toothpicks. So I have some toothpicks here. To wipe up some extra glue that may happen, I've got some Q-tips or cotton swabs. I have a little bit of tape. Any tape will do. I'm not exactly sure. We won't be using much tape, but just it's here in case we need it. And I have an emery board. You can alternatively use sandpaper. If there's a dollar store near you, I would suggest buying one of these. It's $1. You get a lot of use out of these, and they're really good. And once you gather all this equipment, let's go on and I'll show you how to start gluing this kit together. Okay, there are 5 of these axles that have to get glued. And one of these axle caps has to get glued to each of these 5 axles. So as I've told you before, I really prefer to apply the glue using a paintbrush. So I don't need much glue. I'm just putting a little dab there. This has been dipped in water. I sometimes, to dry it off, I just wipe it on my hand. Remember, this glue is non-toxic. It's very nice to work with. Now, before we actually apply the glue, let's take the axle cap and put it onto the dowel as a dry fit. Now, these can sometimes be a little tight. If you cannot get the axle cap on, you may have to take the emery board and just give it a few strokes. Remember, we're gluing this on, so as long as you can get it on like that is good. Now, to make sure it doesn't come off, I want to just put a little bit of glue. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue right in the bottom and along the sides of that axle cap. If you can see, it's not much glue. And then I am going to put it on the dowel and push it in as far as you can. Now, even though there isn't much, this doesn't go in very far, it is possible sometimes for it to go in a little crooked. There is a little bit of adjustment that you can make in its perpendicularity. So before you let it dry completely, examine it, rotate it around a little bit, and if it looks unsquare, just tip it a little and try to get it as square as you can, just like that, and then put it to the side to dry. Now, try to avoid any glue coming out, but if glue does come out, you have to clean it because these surfaces actually have to be really good for the model to work well. So make sure no glue comes out, and if it does, make sure you wipe it off. Remember, the glue is water soluble, so you can wet the Q-tip a little bit to wipe off glue. Sometimes something like an X-Acto knife blade works really well because if the glue comes out, sometimes you don't even have to use the Q-tip, but you can literally just scrape the glue up like this and just pull it right out, and then just wipe it on your finger and get it. So anyway, glue all 5 of these axle caps onto their respective dowels, and we'll look at the next step. There are 2 dowels that have to have this very thin wooden washer glued to the end. Now make sure you get the correct washer. This one is the one that's thinner than there is another washer in the kit that's the same size in diameter, but the thickness is thicker. So this is the very thin one, 1/16 of an inch thick. Now, Since this was laser cut, the inside could be filled with a bit of ash. So what I like to do to make the glue a little more effective is I like to clean out the inside first, and I blow it. Now, the way this is put on is first you slide this washer on like this, and now we're going to apply the glue. I am going to use a toothpick for this one. Now that last piece of glue that I put on the cardboard has kind of dried up a little bit. It's been a little while. I had the camera off and I was preparing for this next scene. So I'm just going to put a little bit more glue down. I'm going to clean off my toothpick. And now, see if the camera can pick this up. But I'm just going to run a very small bead of glue around the very outside rim of the dowel, and I'm going to make sure I apply glue in a sort of a continuous ring until the entire dowel has a nice little uniform, you can see in the camera, nice little uniform bead of glue. And now I'm going to just slowly slide the washer up into place. Now you can even rotate it a little to get that glue to kind of spread all over. And now I want to put it in right up against the edge. Now, I actually don't mind if a little bit of the dowel, and I mean a little bit, sticks out beyond the surface of the washer, because I can sand it flush and it will look really good afterwards. What I'm more concerned with is that the washer be pretty perpendicular to the dowel. So you have to use a little bit of your skill to make it perpendicular. Usually you can eyeball it pretty well. If you have a right angle, you can, or a ruler like I have here, you can actually put the ruler up against the edge and make every effort to get it as perpendicular as possible. Not super critical if it's not. Now there's a little glue on this side that's sticking out. I can just let that, I think I will, as a matter of fact, I think I'll, rather than potentially shift the washer because it's nice and perpendicular now, I'm going to just let that excess glue dry, and when it dries I'm just going to sand it down with my emery board. Now this is a little precarious, so this is where the tape sometimes comes in. So I'm just going to pull off a little piece of tape, and I'm just going to tape this dowel to the edge of my table right here. I'll bring my camera down so you can see it. I just taped the dowel with the washer on to the edge of the table where it's going to dry. Now remember, there's another one of these that has to get that, so just make sure you do that to both of them. There are 4 shafts that get assembled the same way. They are labeled shafts 1 through 4. Their labeling is shown by these small little engraved cross marks. So this has 3 cross marks on each side. This is shaft 3. Now basically these 2 pieces are going to be slid together and glued, and then one of these axle caps will be put onto it, and the result is going to be a shaft that looks like this. Now in the kit there are also, I believe there are 4 or maybe 6 of these little pieces of wood that can be used as clamps. Originally, the original intent of the kit was to just slide these 2 pieces together and not glue them at all. It proves that the kit is considerably stronger if in fact you glue them together. Just note the 2 pieces are a little different. One has this sort of tab on the end, and the other one has what looks more like a little fork, and they'll go together well. Now to put it together, we'll practice the exact same technique that we've been doing. Put a little glue on a piece of cardboard or index card or something like that. I'm going to use a toothpick, and what I'm going to do is just dip the toothpick in the glue, and then what I do is I run sort of a dotted line of glue down the middle here. I don't want to put too much glue on. These, like I said, originally we weren't even going to glue these at all. So it doesn't need a lot of glue, just enough so that the two pieces can be stuck together, give the model a little more structural integrity. So I don't know if the light is good enough to see this, but there you can sort of see it's just a few dots of glue, and I'm going to do it on the other piece as well. So I'm just taping it onto the side of the table while I grab the other piece and do the same thing. So I'm just going to put my glue, a couple of little dots down the middle. When you slide the two pieces together, the glue is going to get nicely slid, more or less spread out along that center line. And we don't really want too much extra glue that we have to deal with wiping up. So now we're just going to slide the two pieces together. Should not be a problem. Make sure you slide it all the way up to the end. There may be a teeny tiny amount of glue may come out. Remember, keep this glue at a minimum. Notice there's no glue coming out the sides here at all. If you look at it from here, the purpose of these pieces of wood now are to give us a little clamping power. Now you can use your eye. You might be able to adjust the center a little bit. It should slide pretty much in the center, but you can make little minor adjustments to make it perfect. So just make sure these are in the center, and once they're in the center, I'm going to use my little pieces of wood to clamp it together. Now on this side, same thing. Make whatever little adjustments you need to make in centering it, and then you can use the piece of wood to clamp it. Now keep in mind, one clamp is going to be 90 degrees offset to the other because of the way these pieces are glued. So I'm squeezing this side on this side and this side on this side, and you're going to want to let that dry for like at least a half an hour. Once the two halves of these shafts have been glued together, we can now glue an axle cap onto it. So you've glued these on before to the solid wooden dowel shafts earlier. So now, got a little sloppy there with the glue. Just gonna, again, I use the paintbrush, get a little paint in the bottom of the axle cap, and now just push this on. And again, make sure you can push it down on the table. Make sure it butts right up against it. And when you're finished, do this to shafts 1, 2, 3. And for shaft number 4, I'll show you for shaft number 4 is just a little bit different. Just to briefly go over, again, I've put small little drops of glue along the front, along the middle track of both halves, and now we will just slide them together. Again, make sure the two halves go to the final end. The two ends should line up, and then just while this dries, I will apply the clamps. These little clamps are tapered so that as you push them in, there comes a time when they will start to grip pretty well. So just again, the two clamps are always going to be perpendicular to each other. Let this dry, and then I'll show you how to glue on the washer. Okay, we'll now glue the little wooden washer onto shaft 4 now that it's dry. I'm going to again just take a Q-tip or just something to clear out the ash that may be inside here left over from the laser cutter. Now I'm going to just slide the wooden washer just a little onto the shaft, expose a little bit. And now I'm going to use my Q-tip, has a little leftover glue on it, or I should say my toothpick, not my Q-tip. And I'm just going to apply glue to the very end of this shaft. I'm going to apply it on all these little surfaces. So since the shaft is a kind of a cross shape, there are a lot of pieces of surface area for this glue to get onto. So I have glue on there, and now I'm just going to slide the washer to the end of the shaft. You don't want it to slide off the shaft, and you do want it to be pretty perpendicular. Now you see I have a lot of glue sticking out the top of that. So I'm going to grab my paintbrush, pretty much get almost all the water out of it, and then just use it to wipe up this excess glue. Okay, now again, you want this to be pretty perpendicular, and to get that, you could put it on your tabletop. I'll use a small piece of scrap paper. Here's a piece of scrap paper. I'm going to put this down and just bring it down to it. Give it a little twist like this. Not very in the light. I'm just going to give this a little small little twist. Bring it up out of the paper, and now you can see it's on there very nice. It's nice and perpendicular. And again, you can tape it to the side of the table right there while it's drying if you want to. You can tape it to the side of the table if you want to. Okay, we're going to glue together the handle of the kit right now, and these are the 3 pieces you need. I just want to point out this washer is the thicker washer. The one that we glued onto the shaft earlier is, they're very similar in size in terms of outside and inside diameter, but they're much different in thickness. I don't know if it's that obvious. Also, the actual wood is a different kind of wood. So make sure you have the thicker washer now for this operation. Now before we glue it together, this handle has a rounded end. It's going to go, the flat side's going to go in here. Now I'm doing a test fit. Now I'm noticing this is really tight fit, maybe a little too tight. So I'm going to take my sanding ending pad here, and I'm just going to sand this a little bit until the dowel actually slides in without too much of a force. It doesn't take much, and then you can get it to go in pretty nicely. So I'm going to just give it a slight bit more. Now I'm going to take the paintbrush, apply a nice amount of glue to the bottom of it. As I push this in, I actually want some of that glue to come up to the top, and I'll use that to glue the washer on. So I'm going to push this into here, just like that. Make sure it doesn't stick out beyond the bottom, so make sure it's flush against the bottom. And now you'll notice there's a little bit of glue that came out, and I'm going to just use that. I'm not going to apply any more glue. I'm just going to glue this washer down. The grain of this piece of wood runs this way, so if you want, you can make the grain of the washer go the other way, but it doesn't really matter. Now, a little bit of glue did gush out the sides, so I'm just going to take the brush, a little damp, just a little bit of water on the brush, and the handle is good. You can check if you have something like the little steel ruler I have. You can check to see if the handle is perpendicular, which it is. If it's a little bit off, you can just bend it a little bit to perpendicularity and let it dry, and it'll be fine. So the final product is this. There is a screw that goes in here. It should have come with the kit. A 256 screw and a nut goes on the other side. But that's it. Alright, now the next step we're going to do is very simple. We're going to glue this small little extension piece of wood onto the back side of the Pegasus figure. So make sure you grab the Pegasus figure that has the extension on it, and make sure you flip it over, because you definitely want to put this on the back side. Now before we glue this, if you happen to have any of these clips for, these paper clips or clotheslines clips, these can be useful for the next step. It's not that important, but if you have them, it could be useful. I have my cup of coffee. Whatever you're drinking, enjoy yourself, take a break, have a sip of coffee. Anyway, let's do this. Now, this piece is slightly unsymmetrical. You'll notice there's a taller side and a shorter side. Make sure the taller side is facing up and the holes are going to align with each other. And I'm going to just put the glue in here. Don't really want the glue to go into the holes, so I'm just going to avoid the holes directly using the paintbrush. I'll put the glue in between, maybe just get the outside a little. And now, again, make sure the tall side is facing up and the Pegasus figure is the back side of the Pegasus figure, and just line this up. The glue is kind of slippery, so it does want to slide around. So you want to line this up on both the bottom and sides. And this is where the clips can come in handy. If you have any of these clotheslines, you can just put one there and maybe one here. Just right before it dries, make sure it's lined up. And you can almost remove any extra glue with your own fingers. Okay, and that's all you have to do for this step. And these maybe do apply too much pressure, so I'm not going to use these. I think these are too powerful. If you have bigger ones, use them. If not, you don't really need any clamps. Just line it up with your hands, push it down, and just let it dry. It'll be fine. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to glue the tail on to these shafts that will become Pegasus's front, or I should say rear shaft, and these two cams get glued on to what will become the front shafts. So gather these parts. You'll notice they are in mirror images of each other, so we're going to work with them in mirror images. The first thing you're going to want to do is grab two of these pieces and slide them into each other. Now these don't have to be glued like the other ones did. These are small enough, they fit tight enough together that they'll go just like that. So let's do that with both of these and just get that operation out of the way with. Now just remember, when you're putting these together, the only thing you really have to do is make sure you push them all the way to the ends and just check to see if they're symmetrical. So it should look like a cross right down the middle. Oops, this looks like I could push it a little further. Okay, now I think what I'll do is I'll work with the cams first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide one of these cams onto the shaft here and put it approximately in the middle. Now keep in mind there's going to be, I want this face to be in the middle of the shaft, right? Because the next one's going to come to the right of it. So just keep that in mind. Now I'm going to apply the glue using a toothpick, and I have one right here actually. Okay, excellent. So I think the easiest thing to do is use a toothpick. So I'm going to hold it like this, and I'm just going to apply glue to the inner face of the cam. I'm going to go around and get all the surfaces, even those small little parts of the circle in the back. And then I'm also going to put a little glue on the shaft, because I don't want this to be able to slide along the shaft either. So just maybe a couple of little dabs of glue in those corners. This isn't going to go anywhere. Now again, before you slide the other piece on, make sure they're going to match. They're mirror images, right? And make sure you put it in the part of the shaft so they will line up with each other when you slide it together. And just very carefully work these two together, and when they come together you may get a little glue coming out. That always happens, right? Well, maybe it won't if you're really careful. I think what I'll do is I'll grab another toothpick, which I will use just to get rid of any excess glue that's coming out. Now make sure this is centered as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if it is way off to one side, it is going to possibly cause some issues later when we assemble the figure. So basically make sure there's a same amount of shaft sticking out that as it is there. And if you notice it's a little different, before the glue dries, you can still adjust this a little bit, which I think I will. And I think I see a little glue in that corner. I'll just get rid of that while I'm at it. And just push it together. Hold it for maybe 30 seconds or so, and then you can put it down and let it dry. Now we're going to do the same exact thing with the tail. Now make sure the engraved part of the tail is on the outside. When you slide the shaft in, you're going to be applying the glue to the unengraved side, right? So this will be one side, and then the other one will fit like this. So remember, they're mirror images. Now again, I'll put it approximately so that this surface is in the center, and I will apply my glue with the toothpick. And again, we are going to want glue on the shaft. We don't want the tail slipping either. So that should be good. Again, make sure the engraving is on the outside when you slide these in, and make sure you're putting it in the right part of the cross. Before you really sock it down, make sure they're going to line up. It's about the only way you can mess up this operation, I think. As I'm squeezing it together, I'm also trying to get it centered. That's what I'm doing by making these adjustments. The camera doesn't pick up the centering as well as I do. You really have to hold it straight. Once you're happy with the center location, grab the other part of the tail and just hold it together like this. Again, any of the glue that comes out, you can just use your finger if you want, or a toothpick to grab that glue. I guess the advantage of the white glue over the wood glue is when the white glue dries, it really is clear. The wood glue is a bit on the yellow side, so in some regard I really do like that clear factor that the white glue gives you. But you're not going to see this glue anyway because I'm wiping it all off. And again, just make sure it's symmetrical, or centered I should say, and hold it together count up to maybe 30 seconds, and then you can just put it down. Now, if you have those close clamps like we did have on the step before, we can use them. So maybe I'll get them. So if you do have some clothes pins, you can, these are nice because they really don't squeeze too hard. They just squeeze like the perfect amount, and you can put that down. All right. We're now going to glue this small 1/8 inch diameter wooden dowel onto the big gear. The same thing has to be done to the wheel. That's very similar to this. You'll notice there are 3 washers already glued to the back side of this. This is the only part of this kit that is glued for you. You're doing all the rest of the work. And then on top of that, we're going to put this really small washer. It is a 1/2 inch on the, no, I think it's 3/8 of an inch on the outside, 1/8 of an inch on the inside. So what we're going to do is simply take some of the glue. I like to put a reasonable amount on the bottom of this dowel so that when I push it into the gear, a little glue will come up, and that will be enough to put the washer on as well. So I'm going to put the gear on the edge of my table so I can just push that dowel all the way in. I don't know if, but you can see because there is a hub here, you may have to move this to the edge of the table, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but some glue did kind of gush out. So now I can just put this dowel on without even adding any more glue. Now if you do think you need to add a little more glue, just add a little more glue. It is not a problem, and when it's done it should look like this. Again, if you have a ruler, you can check for perpendicularity. I'm looking that the gap between the ruler and the dowel is uniform, which it's pretty good. And then you can also move it into this orientation and check. And if it is a little crooked, it's pretty good, but maybe this could go a little in the other direction. Just push it over a little bit. There's usually enough play in the hole in the fit that you can move it over a little bit. And you're just going to have to do this exact same process with the big wheel as well. We're now going to repeat the same step that we just did with that large gear, and we're going to do it to the wheel. Now if you notice, there's a hub on this side of the wheel, and this side of the wheel has a counter bore, and it is on this side of the wheel that we're going to put the pin and then the small washer. Once again, I'm going to hang it off the edge of the table here because of the hub. Now one of the ways you can apply the glue is you can dip it in the puddle of glue here. You can use the paintbrush, you can use the dip method. If you get a certain amount of glue on the bottom of the dowel, when you push it through, as described earlier, enough glue will come up through the top. As you can see, there's just enough glue gushing out that I can place the little washer there. Okay. So I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up, but there is a very small amount of glue that I will just wipe up with the paintbrush. And that is pretty much all you have to do. Now again, if you have the ruler, you can check for squareness. It looks very straight. Could possibly be pushed over a little on this side, so I'm just going to give it a little push. Don't break it. It doesn't have to be that straight, just approximately straight. The kit really won't care if it's perfectly straight. Okay, that completes it. I'm just revisiting these parts. Now there are 2 of these shafts that are the 1/4-inch dowels with the thin washer glued to the top, and then this is shaft number 4, which we also glued a wooden washer that had the cross cut out of it. So now I'm going to sand these. Now you don't have to do this really, but when I glued this, I intentionally had a little of it stick up. So now I'm just going to flip this upside down and put it on my emery board and just give it a few rubs. Now make sure this has fully dried. I mean, this has been sitting, actually this is now more than 24 hours since I glued it. I would not sand this for at least a couple of hours. I wouldn't mind waiting overnight. If you're in a real rush to get the kit built, I understand you might be a little impatient, but I do have some experience. I have let it dry for even as much as an hour and tried to sand it just to have the washer sort of slip out of location, and then I had to re-glue it. Here's shaft number 4. Same thing. I'm just going to flip it over. I note the grain is going in this direction, so I will sand it in the direction of the grain. And if you glued it carefully and didn't have much of the shaft protruding, it really will only take a few strokes, and then it looks really nice and flat. Okay. I believe the kit is now ready for you to assemble using the other video. Everything is pretty much done. And remember to put this pin that we just put in the gear, there's a similar one that has to go in the wheel. So just make sure you do that as well, and then you can assemble the kit.